we need to put less emphasis on just the enablement person demonstrating their worth and that this is an investment center and not a cost center. And we need to give more education to executive teams that don't understand maybe how to partner with enablement, how to properly invest in it, and how to set it up for success. Enablement education matters at the executive level. It also matters at the frontline leader level, right? So again, if you're a sales leader, a revenue leader, CS leader out there that hasn't had a great experience or any experience with enablement in the past, learn how to partner with them. It takes a long time to say that there is influence of your enablement program at an initiative level on something like quota attainment or win rates, right? And so my advice there is you want to think about enablement ROI in two sort of buckets. The first is
Vanessa, how's it going? Good to see you.
Michael, my friend, nice to see you. I've got my iced coffee here, ready to rock.
There we go.
You
too? Yes. I love it. I love it. Good to see you again. I'm extremely excited for this, episode.
Likewise, thank you for having me.
Of course, my pleasure. Before we get to topic and the actual conversation, we want to get to know you better. So tell us a little bit about your background, your journey getting into sales and enablement, and what you're working on these days.
You bet. So Vanessa Metcalf, I am the VP of Revenue Enablement at an enablement software company called Showpad. I am located in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, not too far from Michael here, 6-hour drive. What am I up to these days? Gosh, what am I not up to Showpad-wise? It feels like every day is a new fun adventure, but all of the things you would kind of expect. We've been doing a lot from a value selling perspective, but more recently, we've been doubling down on our investment on a complementary framework, which we call value realization. So we have this whole concept of how we're closing the value gap for our customers. That's something my team has been very much driving. I've been working on a number of programs as well to kind of help sellers in this, pretty difficult selling environment, which is not unique to us at Showpad. I think everyone's feeling it across different regions, different verticals, et cetera, along with some pretty exciting things to come in the product from a roadmap perspective. So gearing up for a lot of that as well.
This is amazing. Sounds like an exciting time for the company and for you guys. How did you end up in enablement and stay for so long? You work with amazing companies, Top Hats, right, and Showpad. So tell us the story.
Yeah, totally. So I started out, as many of us do, I started out carrying a bag in sales, which was an absolute blast. Loved it, but kind of hit this point of like, I wonder if there's a field adjacent to this. And I remember, this is almost 10 years ago, hearing the word enablement in the hallways for the first time and thinking like, all right, what is that? I need to know more. And at the time, it was not a thing, right? Even in tech, it wasn't really a thing. Maybe for more established, larger enterprise companies, it was, but it definitely had roots maybe more so in the US, and a lot of Canadian companies and smaller startups were still kind of catching up. And so that's when I got into it for the first time. And like a lot of people's first gig in enablement, it was we were in a stage of like rapid growth, and there was a lot of onboarding needs. So my first gig in enablement was like back cohorts of new hires, training them, getting them upskilled, getting them field ready, and good to go for some of their first field on-sites, et cetera. From there, it was a bit of a zigzag, as careers tend to be. Spent some time in sales leadership, moved on to a company called Docebo, so one of the leading LMSs out there, ran enablement for them, did a short stint running RevOps as well, which was really cool to round out the enablement experience, and something that I very grateful for that experience, because I think a lot of times that's missing in enablement is that operations, data analyst, process optimization kind of skill set. And then fast forward to today, now running enablement for one of the leading enablement software companies out there. So a very meta existence that I have over here, Michael, but that's where I'm at today.
I love it. I love this journey. Look, you live and breathe enablement, and you carry the bag in sales, you did RevOps. So I believe your opinion matters. And you talk a lot about, enablement having impact on revenue. And we hear this right now on LinkedIn more than ever. Like past 2 years, Everybody should drive revenue for the company. Truth or not, I want to hear your perspective on it. Like how enablement can actually influence, revenue, and should we even influence revenue in enablement?
Yes, of course. That is our entire purpose of existence. That's what we're here to do. I will say, I think a lot of the times the conversation and where it gets tricky for enablers, particularly if you're a little bit early in your career, is you're told a lot that you need to do it and that it's imperative and you got to earn your seat at the table. But there's less conversation on how to do it. And so grateful for podcasts like yours. What a number of other amazing enablement practitioners and thought leaders out there are now starting to produce to kind of change the narrative here, right? And show people the blueprint and talk about stories and best practices of how you can get there, because it's not easy, right? And, you know, guilty. I've had a lot of trial and error throughout my career to get to this place as well. So is it important? Yes. How do you do it? Look, this is very organizationally dependent. There's a lot of factors that go into how you do it. And I think you need to read some of those signals for you to establish your plan and your enablement strategy, which will eventually lead you to this place of being able to easily demonstrate your impact. What do I mean by that? One thing, for instance, is executive perception of enablement. That matters. That matters when you're looking for your next job, by the way, for those that are kind of seeking their next professional home. If you have an executive that you're rolling up into, or an executive team that, for example, has bad past experiences with enablement, the people that were just running trainings and creating content, for instance, maybe helping with your SKOs, they're going to have a perception in their head, right or wrong. There's going to be bias there. And so you might need to work a little bit harder to change that narrative and change their perception on what enablement is and can do for them and their business, right? To really get them to think about enablement as that critical strategic performance lever when they think about scale and when they think about their corporate objectives of the 5-year horizon plan kind of thing. So that's the first. I would also call out data maturity matters. And again, that's not created equal. It's going to look very different organization to organization. If you're at a company where you don't have access to performance data, or there is no data strategy of what are the most important KPIs that matter, or if some people have access but others don't, and it's living in all sorts of different places, that makes doing your job very hard, right? And I actually have other visuals if folks want to learn more, talk more about that. That's a topic I've gone pretty deep on in the past. I'm so happy to do it again. But I would say those two core things can influence it.
You opened up two really important topics. How we get executive alignment if it's not there. Like, yes, you got hired and the company is great, but you got in and you notice, okay, if you're reporting to CRO, that mindset doesn't exist. How to really build that? And then getting to the second part of what you mentioned, like data, access to data. Like, if that doesn't exist, should we start with executive alignment and give that reality check about, hey, we have data hygiene problem here, or I don't have access to it? Like, how would you even navigate this? Just imagine you're facing both challenges.
These are the $1 million questions, Michael. So, but they're the right ones to ask. So I think that on the executive perception or alignment conversation, right? The first thing I'll say, this isn't going to answer your question, but I just want to say it. My belief is that we need to put less emphasis on just the enablement person demonstrating their worth, and that this is an investment center and not a cost center. And we need to give more education to executive teams, even CEOs, right? Depending on the size of the company, senior leadership teams that don't understand maybe how to partner with enablement, how to properly invest in it, and how to set it up for success. Because if you're hoping that enablement is going to be this silver bullet magic wand solution for you, and you're not willing as a senior leadership team to do what it takes to provide the conditions for enablement to succeed, good luck. Enablement, no matter how awesome your ROI framework, no matter if you're choosing the right metrics every time, right? Like, you're going to hit a ceiling. And so I think the onus is just as much on the enablement practitioner to show up in the right ways and make sure that you're not spending 90% of your time rolling out webinars and trainings and planning for SKOs, and that you're actually creating systematic programs that result in measurable outcomes for your business, real behavior change that sticks, et cetera, right? There is that onus on the enabler. Don't get me wrong. That should have always been the case. And, you know, maybe we walked ourselves into this a little bit. I'm glad that this narrative is finally very front and center, but equal onus is on an executive team, right? If you're brand new to enablement, don't just put someone in role, your top performer, and hope they figure it out, right? How do you go learn what you need to do as an executive to properly support the function, to cultivate the skill set, and again, to create those conditions for success?
If I'm not overstepping, can you share, or maybe you never actually experienced this, any stories dealing with the same scenario with the CRO, who does not have this mindset, maybe like, hey, Vanessa, we heard you, you're amazing. You want to roll out the SKO. This is a training I want. I want to, roll out
Yeah.
the X, Y, and Z methodology. And, the order list is getting bigger and bigger over time. And just imagine you're earlier in your journey, you already took the orders. So you already build that habit of receiving it. I will deliver it. Maybe not many questions along the way. How would you change that dynamic? I know it's difficult and it is case by case, but I wanted to hear if you actually experienced this early on in your career.
Yeah, so you're right, definitely case by case. I'll give you a personal example, right? It's not that I had a senior leadership team that was opposed to enablement by any means, but again, you got to remember this is like I kind of set out the picture of what enablement was like 10 years ago, especially for, maybe Series B, C, D companies that just didn't know what it was yet.
Yep.
I didn't have a predecessor. I didn't have anyone to learn from. There's no blueprint at the time. There wasn't even a lot of enablement communities, right? For you to go outside of your four walls. So it was less of an opposition in terms of not investing in enablement in the right ways, and more so what is this thing and what can it do for the business? So what did I learn through all of that is it's super important as enablement practitioners we got to get scrappy and resourceful, right? There are times where you're not going to have a leader who is steeped in enablement best practices and expertise. And so learning from our community, from events that are out there, whether it's Revenue Enablement Society, whether it's podcasts like this one, finding a mentor, right? Super, super important. I would say early and often in your career so that you can build, first of all, belief, right? And so that you can start to map out a little bit of your own blueprint and not kind of run into the same walls that other people have done. So I know it's kind of a variation on the question you asked, but I would say that was one of the times where it was actually most challenging in my enablement career, simply because it was like, what is this thing? What should it be? And those were questions we were kind of figuring out together.
So what I'm hearing is that education is the big piece. Like at least those days you had to educate even maybe the CRO about what's my goal here as an enablement in your organization. If it's driving revenue, let's discuss enablement first. Let's define what this actually is before jumping the gun and doing anything. All right, I appreciate you sharing that. Let's talk about data right now. You get to an organization, data hygiene does not exist. There's silos in terms of how we communicate even with each other. How would you navigate that? And do you have, again, any examples, personal examples you can share with us?
Sure thing. So I think about it in kind of a pyramid, right? Data maturity is enablement maturity. You can't unlink those two things, because if your ultimate goal, so at the tippy top of the pyramid, is enablement impact, and enablement impact to you is some version of the following, making up an example. How did our pipeline gen program contribute to the following outcomes? Most enablers, I know there's different schools of thought here, but most enablers are going to follow some framework around, I use a simple 3-level process, right? User reaction and adoption. Okay, those are enablement metrics that typically we own. You use your enablement software, you use surveys, whatever it is to go out and find that, even interviews with sellers themselves. Then you want to dig into behavior application. So not just did they show up, did they like it? Did you get a good result from the enablement live session? But remember, we're not here just to train, right? What's the full enablement program and the environment in which they experience that program? Meaning getting access to the playbooks, getting access to the role plays, to the coaching, to the courses, to the certifications. So once you have that, and people, you can tell that there's been some value created throughout that initial program, including, again, the training, but not stopping there. I have to keep emphasizing that, because PSA enablement is not just training. That's a small piece of the pie, but there's a much larger enablement pie to be had out there. From there, number 2 is behavior application. So now you've done the things, right? You've reinforced the things. The reinforcement plan, by the way, equally important as your launch plan. How you're enabling your leaders to be your reinforcers, your multipliers, make sure this enablement program shows up in their coaching. Once all that's done, you then want to understand, how is this transpiring in the field? Is this a sustainable behavior change? Are you seeing it come up once or time and time again? And that's where you need to be in the field, whether it's shadowing, listening to gong calls, actually going on sites with your sellers, whatever the case may be there. Maybe you're doing some customer calls yourself, depending on kind of what line of work you do. I know I do a lot of that, but just sort of depends on the nature of the business. Then the 3rd level is the business impact, right? So how are you correlating enablement output to some sort of measurable business KPI that you're executive team gives a shit about. Hopefully I'm allowed to swear on this podcast.
Oh, yeah.
So there, again, you're going to break down your leading indicators, your lagging indicators. It takes a long time to say that there is influence of your enablement program at an initiative level on something like quota attainment or win rates, right? And so my advice there is you want to think about enablement ROI in two sort of buckets. The first is at the functional level. What do I mean by that? Eventually, once you run a number of programs or initiatives, you're going to build up your collection of your big change management, right? Like if we were to t-shirt size, this is the XL change management, right? So whether that's sales methodology, whether that's your competency and upskilling programs, maybe it's your onboarding programs, whatever your big bets are, you want to show how a collection of those things at the functional level for your enablement team has had an impact on a specific KPI over time. So what do? I look at the percentage of our reps that are over a specific amount of quota attainment that we want to see as a business. That's aligned by our president CRO, that's aligned by our CEO, and all of our executive team knows that that's one of my main North Star metrics that we're after. And then we're looking over time. What's the trend line quarter over quarter? And what's happening quarter over quarter from enablement that's influencing that metric? That makes sense?
Oh yeah, 100%. And I have actually a follow-up question because you opened a great topic. You mentioned, look, you run your program, you run your training session, or maybe even you roll out a tool. You have your North Star, you already got executive alignment, you know that you're doing this, you're running this program. Then when it comes to reinforcement, so that's where I want to actually ask you a question. When it comes to reinforcement, your results sometimes is tied to how frontline managers, align with this program. And I've seen a lot of challenges. Like I've seen a lot of challenges with my clients, other people in the space that we chatted, that it's really hard, it's really difficult to hold people accountable, whether it be, the end user on field or frontline manager, to really follow the steps and program, because you know how it goes with sales. I'm on field, I have a quota, I got to hit my number. It's important to pay attention to your enablement program, but it's not urgent today. How do we build that urgency for, first and foremost, frontline managers and help them communicate this better with, on-field end users?
Great question, Michael, because this is something that a lot of enablement practitioners struggle with. And similar to the comment I think I led with of like enablement education matters at the executive level, it also matters at the frontline leader level, right? So again, if you're a sales leader, a revenue leader, CS leader out there that hasn't had a great experience or any experience with enablement in the past, learn how to partner with them, right? It takes two to tango, and definitely you're going to see the results of having a great enablement team as a sidekick to you and the results it can bring about for your team. So that's my first little disclaimer thing. Get off the soapbox on that one now and answer your question, which is how do you build that alignment? So what I would say there, it's actually quite simple, early and often. It needs to be a co-build approach. The second enablement operates in a silo on an island, automatically, you're not going to have the trust that's needed for a program to be executed successfully, and then not just executed successfully, but to actually stick. So practically, what I would suggest to go about that is, sometimes you're going to bring leadership into the early brainstorming of a program idea or proposal. Other times you should come to the table with a point of view, right? And give them something to react to. Hey, I've noticed, to give you a practical example, I've noticed quarter over quarter, our pipeline has fallen 50%, right? That's what's showing up in the data. Here are some, activities I'm seeing in the field or maybe lack thereof. And here's a couple of anecdotes that I've gotten from your sellers. So you teach them something about their team or their business that they didn't already know. And then you co-build from there, right? You come up with recommendations and solutions on what you think needs to be done to solve the business problem, and you have them weigh in. This isn't just like you're impressing upon them what your solution is. You are actively seeking and continuously seeking their feedback and their validation, because guess what? Enablement has blind spots. And they're much closer to the field, right? In terms of like their day-to-day conversations. They know their team members likely a little bit better than you do. So rounding out your perspective or triangulating your perspective with their feedback and treating it the approach as much more of a co-build versus like a proposal that you need their buy-in or permission to go ahead and execute. That's what I would suggest. The second thing is part of your program when you're thinking about launching or executing something from an enablement perspective. again, let's talk about the Excel change management. So maybe you're not doing this for every enablement program, but the Excel change management needs to include leadership enablement, right? So again, you want them there ideally from the build or design phase so that it's not like you're training them on the thing in the 11th hour the day before it goes out. But minimally, if you don't have that, they need to be enabled at some point so that they feel like they have, you're not going to get mastery right away, right? But they need to have a glimpse into this program if you ever have any hope of them being able to coach to it. So it's buy-in. It's more than buy-in, because then you're working their way up to like, could they teach it themselves? And then you're going to see the results come from a reinforcement and coaching perspective.
I love this. You know what it tells me? Sometimes maybe it's even better to start with discovery with these frontline leaders to really get their perspective. To your point, there's some blind spots that we might not know, and they're closest to the field. They share this feedback with us. It actually helps us build that, business case and hand it over to executives. That's why I need your alignment, because even your frontline leaders have insight day to day and they confirm these problems. So that's why it's such an important initiative. I don't know if it's a good plan or not, but I want to get your perspective. Do you start your discovery about a problem that you notice with frontline leaders and collect some information before handing it over to executives, or you look at the business as a whole and the North Star that let's say CRO or your CEO is actually offering to the entire org?
Sure. So I think the order of operations that I'm about to describe is heavily dependent on what problem you're trying to solve, or what specific performance metric KPI you're looking to improve, or what challenge you're trying to remove, right? What obstacle you want to unblock for your team. There's all sorts of flavors of enablement that could be happening there. But I would say kind of like three things need to happen. The first is more and more there is expectation. And you should have this expectation of yourself, by the way, and kind of figure out like how to cultivate this skill if you don't have it already. But the expectation of being sort of like the data analyst and being able to understand the data of your business, that matters. So usually I start there because it's you can't argue with data. I mean, I know there's biases in data too, but it's something to bring to your leaders. So situation dependent, but oftentimes I would start there. Make sure that you have a really clear idea of, if you feel like there's a problem in the business for one reason or another, you've gotten a signal that there's a challenge out there, go look at the data and see what that says. Now, there are times where maybe that problem isn't yet showing up in the data. That's okay. So from there, then, you do need sometimes qualitative anecdotal evidence. That's where you can go to your leaders, do some discovery, interview them, interview their reps. Sometimes it's fascinating, the delta between what your FLMs will say and what your ICs will say. So pay attention to that and look for patterns within it, right? You don't want to take what one person said, take it at face value, and then now I have an enablement program I have to go run. Again, it's back to that corroborating and triangulating your approach. And then the third thing, once you've looked at some of the data, you've analyzed performance trends and themes, you've sought some anecdotal evidence, there is a third thing that might not come up in either of those places, which is what's happening in the field, right? So back to what we were talking about earlier. So I think this is where the soft skill of insatiable curiosity, let's call it that, matters for an enabler, because for answers you don't have or aren't showing up in the data, you might need to go hunt them down yourself or figure out what's going on. And so again, I come back to like, go get stuck into the gong and run your call analysis, right? Listen to 20 calls where you think the problem could be coming up and establish some of the themes and patterns coming out of them. Go on site with your reps if that's available to you, or shadow their virtual calls. So I think it's those three things. And in terms of which one you start with, I think it very much depends on the initiative or the problem you're looking to solve.
I love this. Thank you very much for breaking it down. Do you believe your reps burn leads practicing on client calls? When it comes to giving them one-on-one coaching sessions, you just don't have the bandwidth, so you get rid of them altogether? Or maybe you notice that your team spends a lot of time on non-revenue tasks like taking notes, updating CRM, or drafting emails. These are the exact challenges we solve for other revenue leaders like yourself. With SellMeThisPen AI Coach, you can offer your reps role-play sessions at scale while automating one-on-one coaching sessions based on your best practices and methodology. Also, AI will take care of all their non-revenue tasks, like note-taking, CRM updates, draft the email for them, so they can focus on constant improvement while you're focusing on one thing and one thing only: revenue growth. If you're interested in learning more about
about the clients we are working with or use cases that might be beneficial to you, check us out at SellMeThisPen AI.
Now let's talk about the next step. Now, just imagine we got some amazing results. We can showcase that we generate more, we help generate more, pipeline, or certain numbers are increasing because of our enablement efforts. How can we make this consistent and sustainable and say, hey, we build it right now with this program? How can we actually continuously bringing the same result?
Yep. So this is where I think ROI, controversial approach maybe, but it actually isn't enough, right? And first of all, it's not a given that every enablement team is going to get there. So if you're feeling like, oh, I'm not even there yet, first of all, you're not alone. There are a lot of enablement teams out there that are still feeling that way. And like I say, there's lots of amazing resources, free resources now that I think can help point you in the right direction that I would definitely recommend. But what I would say, once you get to a place of ROI, which again, we talked about all of the hardships or limitations or factors that go into your ability to get there, but it's not enough, because then it's about what do you do with that ROI? How do you communicate the impact that the enablement team is having? Who do you share it with? On what cadence, and how do you tell the story around it? Those are three questions that are super important, because if you have the analysis and you shared it with a couple people and they nodded their heads and said that was cool, but it's still not helping to impact the value perception of your enablement business unit, then we haven't fully done our job. So here it's important to set up specific cadences and think about who your audiences are, right? The types of insights and impact analysis you bring to your VPs of sales, for instance, is going to look different than what you would probably bring to your ELT team and what you would bring to your ICs. Those are kind of like your three different buckets of stakeholders right there. So I'd say really thinking through the way you're telling the story, setting up a formalized, established cadence, whether that's a live update to ELT, an asynchronous video, maybe you're joining monthly meetings with your VPs of sales, and then something on the IC side as well, so that they're aware of some of your results. That helps with what you were asking me about earlier, right? If a seller's just thinking like, I got a quota to hit, I can't be off the field for an hour, it helps establish trust. And trust is like paramount for enablement teams, because what you want your sellers, leaders, VPs of sales, CRO thinking, feeling, and like deeply believing is that anytime off the floor for non-revenue generating things, is enablement is only asking for that if we think we are going to accelerate the time spent on the floor, right? To help with execution, to improve effectiveness, to optimize a workflow, et cetera. And once you have that, once that's your vibe and your reputation as an enablement team, you don't worry as much about sellers. I mean, now, if you're trying to book something at the end of the quarter, of course, you can expect a revolt, but otherwise, you don't have to worry about that as much.
You know what I love about what you said? And this is something that I'm noticing even with us as sellers. Like, I'm selling for my own companies, and we walk through this like adoption journey and expansion, especially with bigger accounts. Sometimes you have, yes, I got the logo, I did a great job selling it, and we serve them fantastically. Do we even have a tangible story that we can share with other ICs that are just joining the company or other again organizations to take this seriously? Otherwise, what we are offering is just hypothetically can potentially can help with something, and nobody pay attention to something hypothetical. But if you say, hey, Michael actually used this program, or Michael walked through this training or process, and now you can see month over month he's growing his pipeline, or his close ratio is different from 3 months ago. So you have a real use case, someone who can actually be your early adopter about for other programs you're running, and say, hey, I'm an advocate because I got results from enablement. I tell my peers, like, these guys are serious. They know business. They're helping.
Yeah.
So absolutely. I think it's the same as
Yeah, no, I think I know exactly where you're going with that, right? It's like you have to have your champions. And again, if enablement is firing on all cylinders, everyone is your champion. You're not relying on a group of 10 people that happen to like what you're, they're picking up what you're putting down. Everyone's your champion. I mean, for the most part, I don't know if 100% of people are going to be your number one fans, but for the most part. And that's where I think, to your point, like, yes, ROI could show up in the numbers, and we show how this specific program improved these results first with this set of metrics, right? I took you through the kind of my 3-step framework there, then this set of metrics, this set of metrics. You want to bring that to life though. And personify or humanize it, which is, I think, kind of what you're saying, right? Is like have the direct verbatim anecdotes or testimonials from reps. What was their world like pre this program or pre this coaching effort, whatever it is? What was it like after? So what problems were they encountering and how do they feel? Again, don't worry about quantifying this. This is about how people actually feel. How did they feel about their day-to-day challenges and workload after going through your enablement program?
I like that. And you know what's so interesting about this is that really shows that enablement is way beyond training, because now you have to act as a mini marketing, organization, how to bring actually content to promote what I'm doing, what my organization is doing internally, what impact, and how we communicate this with each different personas. To a point, your IC had different challenges that you solve for. Their leaders had maybe other challenges. It's not only about one specific metrics for everyone. Now let's talk about things that we cannot quantify for those in their journey, that they still not at that level of maturity as an organization to really aim for direct impact on revenue. Is there something that is top of mind for CROs or executive team that you can showcase as an enabler today?
Sure thing. And to round out my answer maybe to your last question, because I don't know if I fully finalized that, of like, what do you do if you don't have great data maturity? There, I would say become besties with your ops team. The connection between, the connection of enablement in several teams matters, right? Like product marketing, product, but definitely RevOps. And so if you're not spending a lot of time with your RevOps team and pointing out like, hey, I think we have this gap in dashboards or data visibility, and what I would like to do with it is X, and similarly co-building, right? Then chances are you're not helping yourself get to the top of the pyramid we talked about before, which will hurt your ability to demonstrate impact. But back to your question, there's a lot that enablement does that might not have a number next to it. Right? If we think about a lot of the things we do with our cross-functional partners, so take product marketing, for instance, right? You're probably working with them on everything from messaging and positioning, pricing and packaging, persona talk tracks, and the types of, customer pathways and the outcome-based statements you want to bring into your sales motions. You might be working on product, solution, or service launches. And so a lot of that early work, specifically on design and strategy, you don't have a number yet that you can attach to it. When we think about things like general process optimizations, so maybe that's working, again, example that came top of mind, right? Maybe, again, you're working with your RevOps or your systems team, and you're changing one of the CRM workflows for your sellers from 15 clicks down to 5. Maybe you can go deep and really understand like time saved, et cetera. But like there are things that don't always have a number next to them that are equally important to, again, really help with that internal value perception of enablement teams. And that needs to be absorbed, right? That needs to be like in the bones of everyone. I always say up, down, sideways in your organization, meaning you don't want that value perception of enablement being like, okay, yes, I do agree. Enablement has led to better outcomes for this business. I do see how it's helped us get to this next stage of growth. That can't only be felt by your executive team or only by your VPs of sales, your FLMs. It also has to be felt by your cross-functional partners. And so that's what I would say. Once you have the ROI, right? Journey to get there. But once you have it, and it's about how you communicate the ROI. And then it's about thinking about what are the things we can't quantify. You want to be doing this really throughout. What are the things we can't quantify? And how do we still show up as amazing partners for all of our cross-functional units that we need to support? And how are we helping them sort of bridge strategy with execution?
Let me ask a follow-up question because I love where you're going. So with direct ROI or numbers or metrics that we can actually track, it's easy enough to protect your seat by saying, my activities are tied to revenue and it's a revenue organization, right? For things that we cannot quantify that solve even big pains for different organizations, how should we build these success stories that you mentioned before, that enablement had a big impact on an organization, someone that actually help us protect the seed by saying that revenue is very important, but if we are not around, if things that we build right now that might again in the future pop up elsewhere is valuable enough that give me the time to figure out how to build all this alignment, get the data hygiene, work with you, educate you about enablement, so we can tie enablement to ROI ultimately. So what are the things we can say? Is it time saving? Is it like more headaches, gone from someone? But how do you really package this as a success story to, basically hand over executive team?
So I think there, as I understand your question, it's all about what value are you bringing to those cross-functional teams. So what does ops get out of enablement? They should have some sort of understanding of like what's happening in the field that's preventing some specific KPI from improving, right? They're the ones that are setting a lot of you think about the yearly plan, you think about quotas, you think about assigning territories. That's in their remit. That's under their control, under their umbrella. And so to add some color commentary and some context to that, they'd probably benefit with understanding like what are the blockers, what's preventing teams from seeing success in these specific areas today. And then also, what is enablement doing about it, right? If enablement's making a big bet, that same example as before, we're going to improve pipeline. We see that 50% drop off, we're getting it back to where it was, or we're improving it. They might want to know a little bit of how the sausage is made to make that outcome happen. On the product marketing side, right? Let's think about, again, I gave some examples, messaging and positioning, product launches, pricing and packaging. They need enablement to help, yes, with the execution, right? Like we are the deployers of change management. That is enablement's job, one of our core sort of responsibilities. But they also, again, for similar reasons, because we often act as that voice of the field, they're probably going to want some of our input on the strategy and design of whatever it is that they're rolling out. Maybe they're going to want to get some help establishing pilot programs if there's new messaging and positioning, for instance. So I think what matters there is that the value that you can bring to these teams, again, not just from an execution perspective, but also from a strategy perspective, that has to be known and understood. And if it's not, you might want to spend a little bit more time with teams like that to make sure that you both kind of discuss like what value do you want to give and get out of this relationship.
How do you prioritize? Like teams always want to get a piece of enablement anyways. Like I need help with something. Product marketing, you mentioned. Everybody needs some help from enablement, and enablement is in between, like a glue, like helping everyone. How do you prioritize? Because I believe it's important to maybe protect is a bad, for lack of a better word, protect yourself as an enablement person. I want to pick the best project for myself too. How would you really navigate that?
Yeah, exactly. You do want to pick the best, program and time, place to invest your time for you, for your team. But ultimately, because again, we think back to enablement's existence to drive measurable outcomes for your business. You don't have time to be like experimenting and tinkering here and there and have, flavor of the week enablement things happening, right? You got to pick your right bets. And you're not going to get it right 100% of the time, and that's okay. But you want to have your own sort of methodology of how do you pick that right bet. So how do you prioritize? I think everyone, you ask 5 enablers, maybe you get 10 different answers to this question. But for me, it's simple, and it's actually kind of old school. It's urgency, importance, and impact on the business. And if you can clearly answer all of those questions, then it tells you you're likely on the right path. I think from there, you mentioned this earlier, right? But some discovery with stakeholders matters. Again, you never want to just take one request and action it unless you know, okay, fair point, right? That's showing up in the data. I've heard it from 5 other people and I can see how it's showing up in gong calls. Otherwise, sometimes and by sometimes I mean always, you need to stress test these things and ask good discovery questions to understand, should this thing become a priority for you? And then if so, what needs to die in order for this to live? So that's super important. I will say on almost like the other side of the coin, I think there's been a lot of conversation in enablement communities about getting good at saying no, right? And the art of saying no, how to push back, etc. Don't get me wrong, huge proponent and advocate of that, because otherwise we become flavor of the week, training, right? Content specialist. You have to get good at that. Absolutely. But there are times where there is the art of saying yes, right? If you, again, have good reason to believe that this is a good time investment for you and your team, go figure out how to build it, how to drive it. Yeah, show up, find other people in the business that can help you build this thing, right? And get it done. Because ultimately, Yeah, it's really hard. Enablement's always juggling a ton of balls, and it's going to feel like there's lots of priorities. You got to make sure we're kind of like attaching our cart to the right horse, so to speak, right? And that there's never too many priorities, that you're doing everything half-assed. But again, in the same breath, you want to make sure that you're not just like perfecting this art of saying no. What are the things you're saying yes to?
I love that. So my last question before we go for some quick rapid fire questions, if you will. So, running enablement is difficult. Like we already discussed, how many moving pieces that you need to, put together to make sure things, work. How about down market? When economy is not good, again, sales teams are struggling. So how do we navigate, what we discussed? We are facing new challenges. How do you, again, position yourself as someone strategic? What do you bring on the table?
Yeah. Look, I love this question, and I feel it deep in my bones, as I'm sure you do, right? Like when we think about what's happening right now, and we look at a lot of businesses that are facing some pretty tough conditions, right? The macroeconomic environment, we have tariff policies that are changing every day that might be, some of their customers are pausing decisions. We've got businesses that the decision criteria and all the steps that they would formally execute on for any sort of purchasing decision, right? Those could be like drastically different than what they were 2 years ago. So we think about all that. And then what tends to happen is organizations, they get scared and they hit pause on things, and they want to start to think about what are the areas where maybe we could cut back a little bit. And what I think about there is like, as long as your enablement team is doing the right things, which we've discussed kind of at length today, right? That's an area, and I know I'm biased here, but that's an area that I think investments need to continue, if not accelerate in. Why? You think about what sellers are up against in that same environment, right? It's hard. Like selling dynamics are very hard. No wonder it's, every year we see the average quota attainment go down and down. On top of that, you've got sellers that are trying to learn at this whole AI first sales skill set. Not easy. You've got buyers who are now using AI to not just like inform their research around evaluations, but to actually run their evaluation. And then you think about the dynamics of buying groups. They're getting bigger, more complex, but there's more and more influences coming from outside of the organization, right? Like an interesting stat I learned a few weeks ago, 35% of buyers right now say 10 plus influences, right? Signals, things that happen to persuade them in their buying decision came from outside the organization, not from inside it. So you think about all those things, and damn, it's a tough job to be a salesperson right now. And if you don't have that enablement team that can shepherd your sales folks through these really, really choppy waters, right? If you don't have a team that can build belief and show the plan of how do we get back to success for them individually, but also as a business when it comes to enablement, kind of like executing on the corporate strategy and some of the goals that every single business unit has, I would argue that business is actually going to be in more turmoil than they otherwise would have been. So I think that's really important to remember. I mean, I would say that for any market, you always have to invest in enablement, but I actually think it's that much more important in a down market.
That's a very important, an interesting angle. And we can continue this conversation on this specific topic, for hours. But yeah, we gotta wrap it up. So do we still have time for some rapid fire questions?
Let's do it. I think I'm ready. Do I need more caffeine for this?
I finished mine. So just finish the sentences. Sales leaders will be more effective if they only
did more coaching.
Instead of SellMeThisPen that we use sometimes in interviews, sell me this.
Can I give you a personal one? Sell me this great general contractor somewhere in Toronto because I could use one.
I love that. Okay. Can you tell me how your career impacted your personal development?
I would say maybe two things. I would say adaptability and creativity. Adaptability because I mentioned, right? I feel like I've zigzagged, which is not unique to me. I feel like most careers are more jungle gyms than they are the ladders, that classic quote. But you got to be adaptable to every new role that you're in. And you also have to be adaptable to business needs and these ever-changing sort of like dynamics that your team, your business, your sellers are up against. And so I do think adaptability matters in your personal life as well, right? Because the only constant in professional life and personal life is change. So adaptability. And maybe this is like an awesome byproduct or virtue of being an enablement, but I would also say creativity, right? Like no 2 days are the same. I always tell every enabler I'm interviewing, you have to be comfortable with ambiguity because you're going to get a whole lot of it. And some people love that and they thrive in it and others don't, right? And so what I do think that brings about in a professional day-to-day sense is you got to be self-motivated. You got to get creative, find out-of-the-box solutions to hairy, complex problems. And that's something that helps in the personal life as well. And it's unique to the field of enablement, I think, too.
I love it. Like, to your point, again, we all have families, we have pets and kids and partners, and we go through change. So it's a great skill to gain from your job. My last question. Our next guest is Matt Marshall. He's a longtime CRO with 4 exits under his belt. Do you have any questions for him?
Matt, I don't know you or your career story, but so maybe my question would be different if I did. But I'm always actually curious about this question for any CRO. How do you cultivate a culture of coaching in your teams, right? In your leaders that are meant to be the coaching, but I think it goes beyond that, right? Like coaching should feel like it's a part of the DNA of every member of the team, whether they're ICs, FLMs, VPs. And so I'd be curious for Matt, how do you go about cultivating that culture of coaching?
I love that. And I'm always curious about the same question and answer we
I
received
bet you are.
Anyways, look, we're about time. I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you very much for sharing your learnings and insights. If someone wants to reach out to you, can they and how?
Of course, absolutely. You can find me on LinkedIn, just Vanessa Metcalf, or my email is vanessa.metcalf@showpad.com. Feel free to reach out to me that way as well. But otherwise, thank you, Michael, for having me. Always good to see you and love this podcast. Keep shining. Keep doing what you're doing.
I appreciate you. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and until next time, bye for now.